Do you want the key to limitless potential? Do you want the secret to eternal youth? Leopold Labs is here for you.
Well, unless you're a pure-hearted maiden, I hope you're all feeling horny today because we're here to discuss Death of a Unicorn. This was a really fun movie, which explored something completely new in the horror category. Unicorns? This was a genre blend. It was definitely a horror movie with elements of fantasy and mythology, but it was certainly a comedy movie as well. It was very funny, had me cracking up. It was sort of a love child between Knives Out meets Alien or Jurassic Park, but definitely a little bit campy like Buffy. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. So today we're going to discuss this movie and do a recap of the details of it, and then puff on Ridley's vape pen while we explore some of the mythology that inspired this film. This movie takes place in southern Alberta in Blackfoot territory, deep in the wilderness. So, of course, we're familiar with that area as big Yellowjackets fans here on this channel. I'm unaware of any unicorn mythology out of that region, but we're always open to new lore from the wilderness. The main characters in the story are Ridley and Elliot Kittner, who are a father and daughter pair. He's a lawyer and she's sort of an angsty teen, and we learn that her mother died a few years prior. They're on their way to Elliot's boss's house, the Leopolds, and that's Odell, Belinda, and Shepard, and they live on the Leopold Wilderness Reserve out in the middle of nowhere. The Leopolds run a pharmaceutical company, and they are planning to make Elliot the CEO of their company because Odell is sick. He's kind of dying. They're keeping that under wraps as well as they can. So out at their house, they have a sort of bare bones staff going on. They have a servant named Griff. They have a small security team that's run by a woman named Shaw, and they have a couple of doctors. They have Dr. Song and Dr. Bhatia, and they are treating Odell, but again, trying to keep things as well under wraps as possible because they run this really large and successful company. So Elliot is a lawyer, and he's the head of a department at the company, and he's worked there for a long time. And so the Leopolds took notice of him because he and his daughter have gone through this struggle of losing Elliot's wife and making a go of it themselves. So we later find out they're planning to make Elliot the CEO as a form of plausible deniability for whatever they're getting up to, but that's fine. That's neither here nor there right at this moment. So on their drive to the property, Elliot and Ridley hit a unicorn in the road. This is kind of all taking place with a loss of technology as they're driving, which might be equated to just kind of being out of a service area. But there was this kind of moment where even Ridley's headphones glitch out, and so the power kind of stops working with that as well. So there is this connection between the unicorns and when they're present and the functionality of technology. It seems to kind of glitch out. They seem to have some effect on that, and they are also sentient of technology and power. And so this is kind of plays into that lore, the mythology of the unicorns, where we're not sure if they're real or nobody's really captured them, on film or in pictures and that kind of thing. So they hit this animal, and it appears as though it didn't die right away. And so, of course, they go back to take a look at it, and we have this sort of small, white, horse-like mammalian creature laying on the ground, but it has a magical horn. And its blood is purple and sort of magical looking. And so they're like, oh my gosh, they don't know how to react to this. Ridley kneels down nearby it. Elliot's kind of freaking out in the background. Ridley reaches out. The animal's not entirely deceased. And so she reaches out and she actually touches its horn. And she experiences this sort of cosmic vision, or kind of similar to a DMT trip, and she's seeing the stars and nebulas kind of all around her. It's very warm feelings, and it's this really magical moment until suddenly her father comes up and bludgeons the animal with a tire iron and disrupts that moment. Ridley is taken out of the moment, of course, very shocked. She's splattered with unicorn blood on her face. or the kind of initial mythology that we see here with this story, of course, is we have, of course, unicorns being presented as this representation of innocence and purity and mystery and mythology. And then the Kittners are on their way to the Leopolds, Leo obviously being associated with the lion, and in unicorn mythology, we have some contention between lions and unicorns. Of course, those Lannisters are gonna roar, so we definitely see that initially with the story going on. We also have Ridley being connected to the Alien franchise. As I mentioned before, there is sort of a reminiscence of Alien or the Alien franchise going on with the movies, and you'll see that more and more as we get into it. Sir Ridley Scott was the director of the first Alien movie, and the female protagonist in there, she's named Ripley. So I don't know if it was a nod there, but I just thought it was worth pointing out. So as we get into the movie, Elliot and Ridley, they end up going to the Leopold's house, and they live in this mansion out in the middle of nowhere. It's massive, it's beautiful, it's very, gorgeous property. And they've hidden the unicorn. They didn't leave it lying there in the road. They put it in the back of their car. So as they're kind of getting settled in at the Leopold's, the group learn that the unicorn is in the Kittner's car because it starts thumping around and creating a whole scene. So they go out there, they're kind of gathered around the car, they don't know what to do, and Shaw shoots the poor creature in the head. However, they quickly learn that the animal's blood has healing properties when they realize that it has cleared up Ridley's acne, where she had been splattered with the blood, and Elliot's allergies and vision impairments are also healed. So Odell is eager to see if the blood might have healing properties that could help him. So he tries a magical elixir made from a powder ground from the unicorn's horn, which his doctors discovered may be the source of the unicorn's regenerative abilities. This elixir heals Odell, which gives the Leopolds the idea to exploit this opportunity for all that they can. They are the owners of a pharmaceutical company. They want to synthetically replicate the healing properties of the unicorn's horn and blood, and Odell even goes so far as to eat its flesh. He's eating unicorn steaks. However, Ridley felt a connection to the unicorn after her vision, and she feels like it was calling out to her, so she knows this is a bad idea. She starts doing her own research into the history and mythology of unicorns, finding that people in the past believed that unicorns were real and had their own stories and experiences with these mythical creatures. There were fairy tales where the animals were symbols of innocence and purity, but there were also nightmares where the unicorns were terrifying monsters who protected the forests. Ridley gathers information to present to the Leopolds, who reject her ideas. They're already caught up in their plans to market and profit from the magical elixir.
I haven't had this much fun since we launched FinFin in '94.
As the scientists prepare for the unicorn to be transported to their labs for research, suddenly everything goes wrong. Dr. Song is impaled through the abdomen by a large protrusion, and all chaos breaks loose. A large unicorn rampages the compound in search of its young. It nearly attacks Ridley before actually submitting to her and even extending its magical horn for her to touch. However, Shaw shoots at that creature as well and hits it and sends it running for the safety of the forest. Odell organizes a hunting party to follow the blood trail, and his son, Shep, stays behind because he cannot find his bow. So, whatever. Odell recruits Elliot for the hunting party, which Ridley is very upset by, and she actually threatens to leave if her father participates. However, she can't actually bring herself to leave him behind, and she tries to reach her father by the phone to tell him that the animal is not actually injured, and by its horn, it has this power of regeneration. The hunting party learns the hard way that the unicorn lured them into the woods when it attacks and kills Shaw and some of the others. Only Odell and Elliot make it back to the compound, and we also learn that there's more than one unicorn in the forest seeking revenge. Odell attempts to tame this beast, only to be impaled through the face when he tried to touch the unicorn's horn. The unicorns then proceed to dismantle the power for the entire compound. Now, Shep, back at the house, convinced Dr. Bhatia to cut off the unicorn's horn so they can run further tests, but he also pockets some of the unicorn's powdered horn for his own scientific experiments. He snorts and smokes the powder, which, according to him, makes him a genius, and he's firing on all cylinders. He also sees the vision that Ridley had had when she touched the baby unicorn's horn. Ridley convinces the group that they must return the baby unicorn to the older unicorns. The rest of the group are eager to escape, but because the power is dismantled, the electric gate must be manually opened. And so the group votes for Griff to go outside to open the gate in a very funny scene. He's like, I have kids. And they're like, you do? Really wonderful bosses. And they also vote for Dr. Bhatia to take the baby unicorn out on their little gurney thing to give it back to its parents. However, the older unicorns are not appeased when she does bring the baby outside when they find that his horn has been cut off. They attack Dr. Bhatia, who's impaled on their horns and ripped apart. Griff is only able to open the gate just a crack, so he sneaks through that and he escapes the carnage into the night. The unicorns begin to attack the house in search of the horn. Shep realizes that Ridley is the pure-hearted maiden who can tame the beast, and his goal is to capture and breed the unicorn so they have a monopoly on the unicorn trade. When the creatures break into the house, Ridley and Elliot run upstairs while Belinda and Shep hide downstairs. Shep wants to retrieve the horn, which is in a little cryo chamber thing, and he creates a distraction so he can grab it, and he and Belinda hide in his father's office, where he also finds his bow. Thank you, Griff. Belinda has the idea to use Odell's oxygen tanks to create an explosion, but Shep doesn't want to harm their investments, aka the unicorns. However, soon they're attacked, and as Belinda's about to be killed, she begs Shep to shoot a flaming arrow to create the explosion needed to kill the beast, but he refuses and retreats. Ridley and Elliot hide upstairs in a bedroom where Elliot confesses he stole the horn out of the cryo chamber. They have a heart-to-heart where Ridley confesses she believes she felt her mother's presence when she had her vision with the baby unicorn. Elliot confesses that he had promised her mother that he would always protect her and make sure she was taken care of, which is why he had partnered up with the ruthless Leopolds to begin with, but realizes that all of it was a mistake. He locks Ridley outside on the balcony and faces the unicorn as it breaks down the door. He runs away with the horn in hand, leading the beast away from Ridley. Ridley drops off the balcony into a bush where she sees her father running away from the unicorn with the horn in hand. Shep then takes her hostage with his bow and uses her to lure in the mythical beasts so he can imprison them for his big pharma ventures. Ridley and the baby unicorn are left in the courtyard where the large male unicorn comes in, but rather than attack her, he submits and lays down in her lap. Shep ties him up, and moments later, Elliot leads the large mother unicorn into the courtyard using the horn, where she also submits to Ridley, lying down peacefully as Shep ties her hooves. As Shep excitedly makes plans for their partnership, Elliot stabs him through the gut with the horn, and in return, Shep stabs Elliot through the gut with his arrow. Shep stumbles around, but the mother unicorn escapes her bondage and kicks him right in the face, sending him flying across the courtyard. Ridley weeps over her dying father, and Elliot wishes for her to tell him about her vision. She says that she believes a unicorn showed her where they came from, but not only them, us as well, a place where we're all heading back to. Elliot peacefully passed away, but the unicorns retrieved him and drug him over to lie with their baby. They lock horns, and a magical sort of storm cloud appears, and the baby's horn reattaches, and he comes back to life, and so does Elliot. The unicorn family jump up and run away into the forest together, just as Griff and a police officer approach the courtyard. Elliot and Ridley are taken into custody, but as they drive to the police station, the unicorns appear to break their friends from the handcuffs which bind them. Just as Ridley had a mental bond with the baby unicorn, Elliot now has a bond with the older unicorns who signal to him that they're under his protection. The movie ends with the unicorns running alongside the police car, and as the screen fades out, the sounds of a car crash are heard off screen. And I don't know if this was a hint that maybe one of the unicorns was perhaps the embodiment of Elliot's wife or Ridley's mother. Not sure, but it kind of gave that vibe at the end of the movie there. I really enjoyed this movie. It was something different and kind of exploring this classic idea with a great modern take. It was nice to explore unicorns in a horror setting, but the addition of the comedic aspect really lightened the mood in a way that I think was necessary, because unicorns kind of walk that line between being a creature of purity and light. So just dumping them into a horror setting probably wouldn't have worked very well. So the comedic aspect helped the movie transcend and kind of go back and forth between blending horror with fantasy and with comedy. I also watched Wolfman this past weekend, and that's another movie which explores the classic horror tropes of werewolves and blending older mythology with a modern twist. Wolfman definitely stays in the horror genre, so there was a distinct difference in the vibe of these two movies. I really liked the infusion of ancient mythical monsters into modern stories, while still including the exploration of the mythology of these creatures that's required to even understand what the characters are dealing with. Like I said, kind of Buffy with the Scooby Gang doing hours of research just to figure out what monster you're dealing with. But that's fun to me. I like that. Ridley was such a great character for this reason, because I know exactly how it feels to be this person, over exploring ancient mythologies just for people around you to be like, why are you the way that you are? One of the great elements of this movie was the use of dark and light imagery. So we had the use of daytime versus nighttime. The unicorns in the daytime were white and light and sort of more mythical, leaning towards the fantasy elements that we're familiar with for unicorns. However, as night descended upon the compound, we saw the adult unicorns emerge, and the horror elements of the story came forth as the group were hunted by the vengeful unicorns. The coloration of the unicorns was also used in this way. The baby unicorn was white, but the adult unicorns were kind of grayish black when they came into the camp. However, at the very end of the movie, after their baby was healed, they transformed back into white unicorns. Making them dark in color was a great addition because it signified that they were coming from a vengeful, dangerous place. These were not the creatures of purity and innocence that we normally associate with unicorns in modern renditions, until they were appeased and their baby was returned to them wholly, and the humans returned to the careful balance of taking nothing whatsoever from these mythical creatures.
Griff?
There was also the presence of Christ symbolism throughout the movie. The unicorn is associated with Christ and with Mother Mary, historically, and the Bible even makes mention of the unicorn, though modern translations change that to wild ox or wild bull. The idea that the unicorn can only be captured by a virgin is interpreted as a symbol of Christ's birth from Mary. In Christian symbolism, the unicorn is often associated with Jesus Christ, representing his power, purity, and incarnation through the Virgin Mary. The unicorn's single horn can symbolize the oneness of God, and the idea that the unicorn can only be captured by a virgin maiden is linked to Jesus' birth from Mary. Elliot and Shep deliver one another a fatal wound when they stab each other through the abdomen. These wounds are paralleled to Christ's wounds from the Spear of Destiny when he was hung on the cross. Though the wound was delivered by a Roman soldier, Longinus, he became a fervent believer in Christ after his blood fell upon his face when he stabbed Jesus on the cross. We had another scene of Shep lying down, saying, "It's sanctifying me," when he snorted and smoked a bunch of the unicorn's horn powder, which gave him visions and may have connected him with the baby unicorn in a similar way that Ridley was connected to it, making him one with the unicorn. However, that crucifixion pose may have sealed his fate. Shep was a lesson in the stark fact that capitalizing on true faith is a surefire way to test the foundation of your belief when all things come crashing down. God will not be mocked, and neither will the unicorn. Now, Ridley spent a great deal of time studying the unicorn tapestries, which are a series of 7 real-world tapestries made in the 15th century and have survived through many perils, including the French Revolution. The series depicts a group of noblemen and hunters in pursuit of a unicorn through an idealized French landscape. The tapestries were woven in wool, metallic threads, and silk. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, which owns the tapestries, has titled and ordered them as follows: The hunter enters the woods. The unicorn purifies water. The unicorn crosses a stream. The unicorn defends himself. The unicorn surrenders to a maiden, which is in 2 fragments. The hunters return to the castle, and the unicorn rests in a garden. The tapestries comprise 5 large pieces, 1 small piece, and 2 fragments, which were mentioned in the movie. Death of a Unicorn actually completed the replica of the fragmented piece, The Unicorn Surrenders to a Maiden, for the movie only, which depicts the unicorn in a violent scene, embracing the horror elements in the movie. Death of a Unicorn took inspiration from these tapestries in the creation and set design of the movie. We can see elements from the tapestries in the costumes, the castle, the pure-hearted maiden, the forest setting, and much more. The movie's director, Alex Sharfman, did a great interview with Den of Geek, which I have linked in the description, where he goes over many of the elements they include in the movie which were taken from these tapestries. I really enjoyed seeing these pieces come to life on screen and creating a story using some of the broad strokes from these ancient pieces. Again, I really loved what they did with Ridley's character and her appreciation for how people who lived in another time period where they truly believed that unicorns were real, or perhaps had even encountered them, for all we know, and how their perspectives would have been far more real than our own in modern times. We look at these creatures as myth, as something from a time long forgotten, but not real. So the fear and the rituals surrounding these creatures were all the more powerful for people of the past over how modern cultures view them. All in all, I really enjoyed Death of a Unicorn. It was a really fun ride, albeit a little bumpy when you're in traffic with a family of unicorns. Yes, it was campy, but not every movie needs to lean entirely into the horror genre in order to be a lot of fun. I myself prefer this style of horror, where it's more of a genre blend to balance out the more frightening or gory aspects. The cast was also really great for this movie. The Leopolds were all very well cast, and Will Poulter killed it. He was so funny as Shep, and Anthony Carrigan as Griff as well. It was a lot of fun, and I hope to see more of this sort of mythical horror making a comeback. And thank you for your patience on this video. I recorded this once already, but I just really didn't like it, so I had to re-record it for you all, which I think was worth it. So thank you guys for waiting this one out. But those are just my thoughts, so let me know yours in the comments below. Be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!
See ya.